Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to the Adventure Travel Club television show. As you remember, on our last show, we were in Pisa, and today we are going to go to the beautiful city of Assisi, which is up on a hill. But we're going to travel a little ways to get there, and we're going to pass one of the largest lakes in northwest Italy. As you can kind of see off here, there we go. Okay. It was kind of a little foggy shooting through the window, huh, Betty?
Yeah, look real quickly. So you can see. I'm laughing when you said about we're heading for pizza, because one time on one of our shows, and I was calling it pizza, and some lady called and she says, "Betty, pizza is something you eat. It's not." So I learned the hard. Well, I really knew
not
it,
where the Leaning Tower is by any means.
No.
Anyway, that was a real great experience to see that and to be able to go there. And now we are going to come to the lower portion of Assisi. I guess you kind of consider this whole area Assisi that we see down here, because we're going to go to the Church of St. Mary of the Angels. And of course, this is where it all sort of started, where St. Francis actually was told to build my church. And the little tiny church building inside this huge, great big basilica that we see right here. And if you watch Channel 49, you could probably have seen several of the special programs that we have on St. Francis of Assisi. And it's great because you can learn so much about St. Francis. I know that I certainly have. It's been just a wonderful education for me. Right now we're going to learn a little bit more as Father Jerry Chavez tells us a little bit more about St. Francis.
Mountain is where another chapel is where St. Francis used to go, because he was at the top of the mountain. And there are several bronze statues laid. One, he's just like this, everything else. Another one, there's little birds on him. Another one, there's little animals and everything like that, where he used to play, to be in union and thank God, because he considered himself not above the birds of the air or anything else. And one of the scriptures up there are, remember the birds of the air, that you're more important than them. Francis said no, because God created everything. St. Francis wrote canticles. That means songs. Cantare, canciones. He sang everything. And the canticle of the sun, of course, and this all creatures of our God and King identifies himself with all of nature. The Mass that is celebrated here is Our Lady, Queen of the Angels of Port Nicola. Port Nicola, as you came in the church, you saw a small chapel. That's where Francis had the vision that spoke to him from the cross, and a special cross, as you'll see. It's not even here, but you'll see it, the Franciscan cross. I'm sure you've all seen it. Jesus spoke to him and said, "I want you to build my church." He thought of building. And that's why he was so intent on building a church. Wasn't talking about that from Scripture, to build the people of God. That's what he realized, and that's where his mission was then, to come and build up an order. He had idolized a priest, a monastic, Saint Benedict, and his ways. And Francis adopted those ways, but went one step even farther, and that's to serving and giving up everything to serve the poor people of God. That's why we have the Franciscans who are identified with poverty. So, and within the church there you see the Port Nicola, the little chapel that he restored, that he built. On top of that, the Queen of the Angels. East meets west here, we might say, because 8 bishops back in California wanted to build a new cathedral in Los Angeles, because Los Angeles, as you know, was already named after Queen of the Angels. And so the bishop there came here to get a special statue, which you see in the Cathedral of Our Lady of Angels, the new cathedral, and so forth, enshrined. He came to bring that gift back. Meanwhile, before he could do that, he died. And then another bishop came to Rome, or was called to Rome, and told that he was to build a new cathedral there, and the name of it would be St. Vibiana. He said, "No, we already have it, Our Lady Queen of the Angels." And the Holy Father said no, and he gave him the body of Vibiana, which is entombed over there, and said, "Take this back, and you shall name this St. Vibiana's Cathedral." So 8 bishops later, 1 cardinal, Roger Mahoney, as you know, went back to the original and built and restored what is originally now called Our Lady Queen of the Angels Cathedral. So here we have California and ourselves joining. And you'll be able to see the original statue of Our Lady Queen of the Angels right here. So this is a special place for us. We're in the chapel of St. Clara, Santa Chiara, We're going to see, hopefully, her little chapel. We are very good up at the top of the hill off the Piazza Minerva. The cross calls out his name specifically. I am talking to you, and you are to build my church. And of course, Francis, with the influence and everything, had said, gee, that's not going to be hard. I can build a church. But all of a sudden, he began to realize, through the sacrifice and everything else, and trying to get all of his co-workers to build up this little church, and you can see just a little church, how difficult it was. But yet through that sacrifice, that call that he kept having, all of a sudden he realized that there was something, a greater call, that God was calling him to do bigger and greater things. And that's why he pulled himself away to be found in prayer, pulled himself away to find out, God, what is it you really want me to do? And one of the things that Francis recounts is, I don't want to be your slave, which is from the second lesson today. You're my son, you're not a slave. And yet Francis says, I am a slave, because Lord, he says, you tricked me, you duped me, you got me, and I fell for it. Because he listened to the word of Jesus speaking to him. And then trying to align himself in such a spiritual way, Francis says, he used to pray, I want to be more like you. I want to be more self-sacrificing. And then the one thing happened. All of a sudden, the stigmata. The wounds in his hands, in his side, and his feet. And like Jesus, then he began to suffer. Like Jesus, then he was put away. And only at certain times when Francis found the things most difficult to do within his life, his human life, that's when the bleeding would occur. Because, Francis, you have to be totally self-sacrificing. You have to totally give. And so within the Franciscan spirituality, the Franciscan way of life, there's many things for us to reflect upon here. But most of all, where does it begin? It begins right in that little chapel out there, right in front of the cross. And again, it reminds us of St. Teresa, that the nuns used to look at the cross, and the nuns used to be jealous of her. Gee, what'd she say to God? And all this stuff, and they're praying, and blah, blah, blah. And so finally, Mother Superior says, we want to know what you're saying one day. She says nothing. He looks at me, and I look at him. That's exactly the same thing Francis did. And he looked at our God so intent and so much in love, with the love and the sacrifice that he had for sinners, that he said, yes, I was a sinner. You know how Francis turned and left everything and walked right through the city naked. Walked right through the city naked. To leave everything behind the gospel message. He who loves mother, father, brother, sister, anything more than me, what does Jesus say? Is not worthy of me. It's not worthy of me. I come first is what Jesus says. And that was the response that Francis gave Jesus. You come first in my life. You've spoken to me. Let me listen. Let me do. And so look at the Franciscans throughout the world that have built up the Church of God.
Well, thank you, Father Jerry. That was a real good explanation of St. Francis. And there's so much to learn about St. Francis.
Yeah, Father's very articulate, too, isn't he?
He's wonderful.
Yes, uh-huh.
Wonderful. I love this. Here's a statue of St. Francis, and those are real birds. I mean, the bird is nesting there.
Yeah. Watch as you, and you'll see pretty soon the feathers will, there we go.
Yeah.
Because we didn't believe that. Father had to point it out to us, huh? And that's really neat.
Well, we're still in the church here, and it's quite a large complex right here. But we're going to go visit a place here that was interesting to me because I didn't realize that it was St. Francis who set up the first nativity set and our nativity scene. And here we do see the nativity scene with St. Francis and the baby Jesus right here. So this started a tradition which, of course, now has grown worldwide. We see nativity sets everywhere.
Yeah, now the United States is trying to take us so that we can't have them anymore, trying separation of church and state, and it really bugs me.
Well,
but anyway, that's neither here nor there.
You can still put one up on your lawn.
Yes, you
can. Nobody can stop you from doing that.
This
was a crucifix that was, I thought, very unusual. I wanted to get a picture of it there as we were walking out on the side of the building here. It was just, the building is just so beautiful. Nice, big, beautiful plaza there.
Yeah, but it's simple too.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the color maybe that makes it look so much more simple than some of the others? I don't know.
I think it's very tastefully done.
Yes,
right.
I like that.
And of course, inside, as Father had mentioned, is the little chapel that St. Francis built when he heard the Lord speak to him and said, "Build my church."
Now, that was his original one. That was
That's
the
correct,
original one.
And I'm
wasn't
sorry
it?
that I don't have a picture of it to show you, but you'll just have to go with us the next time when we go back to Italy.
To see it, huh?
So we're going to head up the road now and get up to the village, which sits up on the hill, which is really quite magnificent. It's magnificent looking at it from here, and also when you're up there looking back down over the gorgeous valley. Isn't it beautiful, Betty?
Wow, look at that.
It is nice.
Now, what is that we're looking at?
Well, you saw part of the other basilica where St. Francis is buried, and we'll see that a little bit later on. There's several churches that are up here on top of the hill, and there's quite a history of it. And there's also a castle, as you can see, that's way up on top of the hill.
But are those residences there,
Yeah.
Marv?
There
People
are-
are living. This is the town that people are living in, and so these are like apartments where people live.
I would suspect so. There are
Okay.
probably more religious that live here than other folks, because the Franciscans, of course, consider this pretty much as their, as their home base, and there are a lot of them that are there. But we're going to learn more about that. Now, we also picked up a wonderful local guide, so let's give a listen to her.
And there Francis met St. Clair, and for her Francis established the female movement of the Poor Clares. And St. Clair of Assisi lived not in Assisi, but she lived in a small convent built for her by Francis at San Damiano Church, St. Damian's Church. St. Damian's Church is a church situated not far from the parking lot where you came, and that church is the place where she died in 1253, when she was 60. But in 1260 she was buried in this church, but already immediately after her death the body of Clare was moved inside Assisi. The saint was not buried outside a fortified town. Did you realize of the town walls and gates? Because a political value was ascribed to relics, and the town Assisi couldn't run the risk that the Perugians, the enemies of Assisi, could steal St. Clair's body. That's why from the outskirts of Assisi the body was buried in this church, and the tomb for St. Clair was excavated underneath and concealed, and it was rediscovered only in 1850. But at the beginning, before the conversion, St. Clair and St. Francis were enemies, because Francis was member of the wealthy middle class, while Clare was member of the aristocracy. And the family of St. Clair ruled over Assisi in the name of the German Emperor Barbarossa. When Assisi was liberated from the German Empire, the middle class started fighting against the aristocracy, and the family of St. Clair was banned from Assisi. So for some years, St. Clair didn't live inside here, but she lived in Perugia, another town which is situated on the hilltop right in front. And only at the beginning of the 1200s, St. Clair came back. And after that, the establishment of her order. And today we have Poor Clares living here in the convent of this church. They are 48. But the church goes back to 1257. So the construction of this church was started 4 years after St. Clair's death, and this church is nothing else but the reconstruction of an older church called St. George, which was the first burial of Francis even and Clare. So the body of Francis, who died outside the town, was first buried here immediately after death, and then in 1230 the body was moved from St. George Church to St. Francis Basilica, and in 1257 construction of a bigger church, St. Clair Basilica, for St. Clair's tomb. When we go to see the church, we go first to visit the side chapel. The side chapel is where you see that door, okay? And the side chapel is the place where the crucifix, which spoke to St. Francis in St. Damian's Church, is housed. St. Francis was in that church where then St. Clair lived, and in that church Francis heard the voice of Jesus in 1205, when Francis was 23, and the voice of Jesus told him, "Go, Francis, and repair my house which ruined." So when the nuns, the Poor Clares, moved from San Damiano Church to Santa Chiara Church, together with St. Clair's body, the crucifix was brought to Assisi. with, and it's housed in that side chapel. So when we go to see that crucifix, we see one of the oldest of Italy, because it was painted in 1180 or 1181. The artist is unknown, and you see Jesus triumphing on death, Jesus with open eyes. The crucifix we see in the church is 1290. And this is the crucifix of the suffering Jesus Christ. So you can compare and you can see two different icons. After viewing the church, we go downstairs to see St. Clare's tomb, and we see her body.
And as we can see here, this is St. Clare's body, and it has not, I should say, corrupted. It is just looks the same as when she died several hundred years ago. So it's absolutely amazing that that we're able to see her body as it is today. And there you can see the cross that she was talking about. It's beautiful, beautiful inside. It's very, very stark, I should say. It's not highly decorated, the church, but it really has an awful lot of meaning, and is very, very important, of course, in the life of St. Francis and also the life of St. Clare, as our guide told us. And we're going to listen to her now as she explains some more.
St. Francis Church from here, because no explanation is allowed inside because of the respect of the silence of the Franciscans. And we start with a visit of St. Francis Upper Church, and we finish down below. So we visit three churches, and the three churches are one on the other. The first to be built is the Lower Basilica, 1228, 2 years after St. Francis' death. One day after his canonization, on July the 17th, 1228, the foundation stone of the Lower Basilica was laid. And when Francis was buried in 1230 in the Lower Church, in a tomb excavated in the rock, then the second church, the Upper Basilica, was planned, 1230. And the completion of this church, 1253. So in total, to build two churches, only 25 years. 1228, 1253. And this is the Upper Basilica, which was built in a Gothic style after Notre Dame, Sainte-Chapelle. You see how beautiful the rose window is, and behind the rose window in stone you have the painted stained glass window. This is beginning of the 1300s, the painted stained glass, I mean. And this is the church where the paintings by Giotto are. Those paintings of St. Francis' story. So all the best artists of the Middle Ages came to Assisi to paint the church, because according to the wish of the Pope Gregory IX, who canonized St. Francis only in 2 years after his death, was to have a kind of book in the church. That's why the very many who were not able to read had the possibility to be taught reading the big figures, like reading a book for children. That's why the traditional name of the paintings of St. Francis Church is Biblia Pauperum, Bible of the Poor. And we see in Assisi absolutely the highest example. The church lies on a rock, and this is the church which was built on the rock which was the place of the gallows, where crimes were punished by hanging. It was the rock garbage heap of Assisi. It was the rock called Hell Hill. But when the church of Francis was built here, the hill was called Paradise Hill. And this is the church fourth, and the fourth sanctuary after Jerusalem, Rome, and Santiago de Compostela in Spain. This is the church where the second Jesus Christ sleeps. Francis is called the Alter Christus, the second Jesus Christ. And this is the fourth sanctuary, and actually the people who come to this town to visit the church are very many, between 4 and 6 million a year. But the population of Assisi is very small. Only 1,300 people live inside the old city, and between them 800 are Franciscans. Only 500 are the citizens. That's why you have seen how many shops the town has, because the main resource is tourism. And the church was decorated by Giotto and pupils. And Giotto was here as a young artist between 1297 and 1304. But when we enter the church, you see that the above, not the upper zone of the main nave, has been painted with the story of the Old Testament on right and New Testament on left. So you have the story of the Bible, and the story of St. Francis, but exactly corresponding one to the other, the second Jesus Christ, the Alter Christus.
Well, unfortunately, we were not allowed to take pictures inside the church, but she's right. And I was wondering why there were so many paintings when we did visit the church, and Giotto had painted there along with some of the other famous artists of the day. It was very, very interesting.
What was it? Because it was, you learned your Bible studies.
Yeah, well, you have to realize a lot of people there did not read, so
right.
It was pictorially put on the walls inside the church, the Old and the New Testament. I think it was great. This is the town square, as you can see right here, and this is, I believe, this was the area that was reported where St. Francis, his father, of course, did not want him to do what he was going to do because he came from a fairly well-to-do family, and so he stripped off his clothes and said, that's it.
Well, when we say stripped off his clothes, it was symbolic. I mean, he did it, but
sure.
because he's had the tapestries of a wealthy young man, and in order to show his father what he had really meant, take them back. I don't want them.
It was a very, very big statement which he made.
And others followed him doing the same thing.
Yes, that's true. And he did that in front of the bishop of the town at that particular time, and his father, of course, was there too. So, and as we can see, as the Franciscans, if you read their rule, you see that they don't own anything, and that everything has to be, given to them as such. Anyway, Betty, this building that we're taking a look at right here, this was a Roman temple, because the Romans, of course, were there.
Everywhere.
And of course we're in Italy, so naturally they would be there. But now it has been turned into a church, and this is right, as we say, right on the main square of the village of Assisi. It's really picturesque and really quite beautiful.
I was amazed when I first went to Assisi. I just looked for a little tiny villagey thing, Nothing as magnificent as this.
It really is something. You had a little information on St. Clare. We wanted to go back and revisit that for a little bit. St. Clare is the patroness of television. Now, why is that, Betty?
Oh, I am so glad you asked me that question. It is such fun to have an answer for you. Actually, we have a statue of her, here in our studio, and she's holding a globe.
Let me interrupt you just for a minute.
Sure.
Okay, this is one of the original fountains where the early pilgrims came. They watered their horses, and we're going to see a fountain coming up in a moment where the pilgrims actually drank from, and then a little area that they stayed in. Okay.
Oh, that's all right. We can wait. Because St. Clair will wait for us.
Oh, she'll wait? Okay.
Yeah, because maybe there's some interesting things. Of course, the shops were closed. As you could see, the shutters were, pulled down over the
not
shops.
Everything was open.
Okay, so now we'll go to Claire.
Yeah.
And the patroness of television. And the reason that she's the patroness of television, because she actually had a vision like we get every day when we turn on our tube, and it was Christmas time, and she was ill, and she was confined to her quarters, so sick she couldn't go to church. So she prayed, and then all of a sudden she heard music, the singing of the friars, the choir, and the organ music, and she was transformed because it was the Christmas music. And then because she wanted more, she said, oh, it's beautiful, but oh, if I could just see it. And lo and behold, the whole manger scene, the Mass, was there pictured in front of her. So she actually saw the Mass from her sick bed in the convent.
So
that
she
was first
had a pretty heavenly television.
Like Channel 49.
Exactly.
Just like Channel 49.
Oh,
but
that's
isn't
wonderful.
That's a really beautiful story.
Yeah, it is.
And how marvelous that somebody had enough sense to pick her up as our patroness.
Yes, that's right.
Did you do that, Marv?
No. I think it came long before I knew about it. Yeah. And that's really a wonderful story. This is the outside again of the church that we can see. This is the church where St. Francis, of course, is entombed now. And it's quite a big church. We've been here before and have celebrated Mass in there before, and it was really just really magnificent. And again, I say, we can show you pictures and talk about it, but it's just so wonderful if you can be there and actually experience it as well.
Well, we'll do it again.
Yeah, I think we should. I'd never get tired of going to Assisi.
When I
went
the first time, I went probably maybe 10, 12 years ago I was there. Quite a difference of the whole building, even what the construction and
Well, you know why? Because they had a big earthquake. Remember the
that's
earthquake in
right,
Assisi?
that's
They had a
right.
big earthquake, and so much of some of the churches were just really damaged. In fact, you couldn't get in it for several years. They had to do reconstruction work on the on the churches, and it was a horrible thing. But anyway, they did. They reconstructed it and put it back together again, and now it's real safe. And I didn't realize that this area was prone to earthquakes. But you get further on down into Italy, and you can understand perhaps why, because you have so many volcanoes down in the
Hey,
southern part.
tell me something.
Yeah.
How come there's not more people?
Because this is really the off season. The time we went was in November, and so which is a good time to go. Otherwise, if you were there in the summertime, you would not be able to move. Remember, our guide was telling us how many millions of people come to Assisi every year. So we picked a really good time, Betty, to go.
I was thinking perhaps this was like a Sunday, and there weren't as many people. And it was later too in the evening, huh? Wasn't it?
Well, we
It
were
looked
there
dark,
most of the
yeah,
day.
most of the day.
As you recall, we wanted to spend a lot of time, so we got our itinerary changed a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we have moved on from Assisi now, and we have arrived in the evening time in Rome. And this is where our next program is going to originate from, and we're going to see the Holy Father as we have an audience with him and see some of the wonderful sights in and around Rome, which is always a real thrill, isn't it, Betty?
This is going to be something to really look forward to. Rome, romantic. Arrivederci, Roma.
Ah, it is the eternal city, as they say, even though it has an awful lot of traffic. However, they have arranged things so that you can get around a little more efficiently than you could just even a few years ago. Anyway, I do want to say that that will be our next episode. Will be here in Rome, and Betty, I also want to remind everybody that we do have some more trips coming up. So, if they're interested in the trips, they can give you a call at
488-7443.
That's right. So give Betty a call. She can send you the brochures. That's about all the time that we have. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.